Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. This morning I'm a bit tired. Everything comes to, I don't know, maybe it's the life of a Zen priest, but it seems like everything comes at once. Good and bad come at once, all together. So today I hope we'll all acknowledge and have a chance to just speak with Unzan a little bit, as this is going to be his last Sunday with us. He's leaving on Tuesday. Already a month has whizzed by, and it's been just really wonderful to have him here to train with and to see his practice develop and to watch the grounds and Zendo develop with his care and energy as well. It's always a really challenging, it's difficult sometimes when it's time to go. I so love having people here, and I always think when I have residential monastic students that if I just had maybe a year more, that would be really great. We could really get somewhere. I think we got lots of places. It was a good time. Also, as many of you know, I've been involved with my first dramatic production in 20 years or so. And performances started. Opening night was Friday. Yesterday I had 2 performances, an afternoon matinee and then the evening. So throughout this period of training with Unzan, there's been a lot of me getting home at 11 o'clock at night or so, and then our 4:30 wake up with yoga in the morning. So I've been really run thin. And people are often sort of asking, like, how are you managing? Are you doing okay? And recently I've been really reflecting on that and reflecting on the past couple of years and just how all of the external affairs, all of the family business and all of the struggles of the Zen Center and the sort of marketing and business and all that kind of stuff was also really busy and very demanding, and I was really tired. But all of this stuff that's been happening over the past couple of months, although it's been physically demanding, physically tiring, I've been feeling really nourished, and I feel very solid and together and happy, dare I say happy right now. So it's quite wonderful. But I guess I should warn you all that when Eshu's happy, it's a scary thing. The other thing that I've really been observing is how much sort of the cross-pollination of the practice of theater has been impacting the lens through which I'm looking at Zen practice right now. I don't know if everybody knows, but certainly my entrance into the world of Buddhism, or the concepts that are taught in Buddhism, was through my involvement with theater. The nature of the self and the nature of character were really sort of where I really started to explore ideas that were later really fleshed out for me by Buddhism, by Zen. So the idea of who am I, and what are the motivations for this character that I'm playing in this play, or as the case is in this particular play, the characters that I'm playing. And I found it really wonderful this time around to be engaged in a play without a lot of the negative life habits that I was immersed in when I was doing theater. Like, I'm not smoking dope all the time, which is great. I'm not always looking for my next girlfriend or romantic intrigue with the person who's on stage with me this time around. So a lot of my energy is just going into learning my lines and getting my characters down and dissolving into this collaborative effort to tell a story. And it's funny because this is the first musical that I've been involved in. So I actually get to check off one of my bucket list things from like my earlier days, never been in a musical, I want to do that. But one of the things that's really sort of like it's coming back to me through theater as I look at the form that we use in practice is how many aspects are very similar, and they have similar impacts if you allow them to have those impacts. We even use the same terminology in the Zendo as we use in the theater. And so there's a bunch of stuff that was coming up for me this morning, even when we were getting involved in practice, getting ready for practice, that, I think you might all be in trouble. So that's good. And this is, one of the things is like, I talk about it all the time, and I talk about how when we are taking on officer roles, there's the word role. It's not R-O-L-L, it's, you're not rolling into it. You're taking on a role, it's a character. And that character has certain dynamics, just like a hero or an ingenue or a villain in the theater has certain aspects. And they're archetypical almost. And so when we take on that role, we have to kind of shed some of our personal self, our personal character, in order to more fully embody that character, that archetype. And so in the Zendo, we have all these different roles. We have the Jikajitsu, and we have the Shoji, and we have the Densu, and we have the Ino, and we have the Tenzo, and we have the Shika, and we have the Abbot even is a role. And even if you don't have a role, it's kind of like being a chorus member in a theatrical production. You're not off the hook. You're still responsible to uphold the whole production with your conduct. You have to be engaged. There was a few scenes in which I was in this play, I'm just kind of in the background. But one of the comments that somebody said to me afterwards was like, I kept watching you because you were still really engaged and like you were having reactions to what people were... Exactly. And when you're sitting as a member who doesn't have a role, that's your practice, is to be engaged and aware of what's going on and to support the whole endeavor of what's taking place. One of the things I was chuckling about to myself as we were going through this morning's proceedings was, as a director, there was an exercise I used to do with my actors, and in order to get them into character, you just sort of interview them. And again, here's another interview. Oh, great. So maybe this is going to start coming into interview. So if you're playing a role, one of the ways that I can really check to see if you're playing that role, if you've embodied that role, is just to ask you questions. Is to say, like, Shoji, how many windows are open in the Zendo right now? What temperature is the thermostat set at? How many of the cups that are laid out have fish on them, and how many don't? Oh, if we're just sort of doing the job as a sort of task that we have to do, is there anybody who isn't feeling well? Is there anybody who's having physical problems this morning in the sit, who struggled to get up, and who was it? Is there anything that you can do to be of assistance? Jikijitsu! Is there any anger going on in the Zendo this morning? Is anyone feeling upset, grief? What's the energy like? How are people's ability to grasp the form? All of these kinds of things. Densu, are you on the mark? Are you on the pace? Are you closing the gaps? Are you leading the tone of the chanting. How are the butsudans? Are they set up appropriately? What more can we do to honor this practice and this tradition through the way that we're paying attention to setting up the shrine? And it keeps going on and on. Ino, are you all over those officers to be enrolled? Who's struggling with what? What are the areas that we need to focus on developing? And we have to answer these not as Bob playing the role of Shika or Bob or Sally playing the role of Jikijitsu. We have to answer as Jikijitsu. And that's the tradition in Zen, is that when you're in that position, if you're in an officer role, everyone else in the Zendo, all the other officers, use the title of your office, of your role. Rather, it's like the dramatis personae. We should have that instead of the officer roles sent out. Dramatis personae for this Sunday's production of Half Day Zendo. Maybe it'd be more fun. I don't know. And that's one of the things that was happening during the last session I was at down at Choboji that really started to come up. I don't know. Maybe I've been coming out of this fog for a while. Was in the afternoon. We chant the Lotus Sutra, which is this brutally long Japanese chant with some monosyllabic and some multisyllabic Japanese characters that you have to, like, whether it's multisyllabic or whether it's single syllabic, they have to be done as they're broke. Like, it's in Japanese, you chant character by character, right? So the drum is going bop, bop, bop. So it might be bon no mu, or it might be bon nu haku mu jetsu mu. It's like you have to sort of really, and so it kind of sucks you in, and it's hard. It's really, really hard. But what started to really strike me when we were doing it at the last session was that when you're all doing it together, it can be kind of a game. It can be kind of fun. And what really struck me was that at one day, it was like day 2 or day 3, really kind of early in the session, and the Densu was kind of new. And there at Choboji, the Densu does both the bells and the gongs, and the drum. And so sometimes when you're doing that, especially what happens is at the beginning when you're doing the bell and the drum, and you're doing that bing bong, sometimes you're like, and you try to increase the sound, the tempo of the bell, the other hand starts going, right? And so we get into the Lotus Sutra on day 2 or 3 of the session, and the drum is going do 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 do, and it's like you can't really, the Densu, maybe they could, but it's kind of awkward. And when you're Densu, for everyone who's been Densu, it's sometimes very hard to actually know whether you're fast or whether you're slow. You're kind of so involved in it that you're just going and you're like, I think this is okay. And if everyone's kind of with it, you kind of assume it is. So we're doing Lotus Sutra. And then the last beat comes down. Genjo goes, woo! And so there can be a lot of fun to it. And that's one of the things about Zen practice, and particularly in the Rinzai tradition, that I'm really starting to notice, and I'm going to be sort of putting weight on, and there's been some other people who have been noticing it, is, as with everything in our life, particularly repetitive things, we like to put them in this place of habitual comfortness. So we like to slow everything down so that we're kind of in our comfort zone, so that we're not stumbling around as much, so that we're not making as many mistakes. And that's kind of how we live life, and that's okay. But in Rinzai Zen practice, the practice is always kind of pressing us forward to the edge where stumbling is likely, where mistakes are probable. And what we're practicing with is how we relate to that, and how we're okay with that or not okay with that, and how we respond to the mistakes that we make, and watching how the self sort of inserts itself, or watching how our mental distractions or fantasies sort of come up. And what we notice is, one of the things, especially over the past month with Unzan, in the mornings, after the 11 o'clock cue to cue rehearsal, 4:30 wake up the next day. I'm doing the Dentsu stuff, and my strong temptation is like, let's slow this down. The problem I run into when I do that is I start falling asleep, actually, when and you hear the drum start going, doom, 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 doom. And I'm all over the place. My eyes can't focus on the words, and so it's sort of all over the place. Unzan's relatively new to chanting, and so he's trying to uphold it, and it's just all over the place. So what I found is actually the more tired I am, the faster it needs to go, because I start going like, you have to kind of squeeze yourself into it. And I think it's the same with all of the roles and all of the practice, and this is important for the Jikajitsu, for example, when you're managing the energy or the spirit, the attentiveness, the engagement of the Zendo. When things are really drowsy, you gotta push it to the edge a little bit to sort of pull people into it. When people are really sort of like edgy and angry and everything, you want to sort of ease back a little bit, slow down a little bit, so that people aren't being broken by what's going on. And you have to, most of all, you have to know that. And that's hard because you're sitting too. And you have all of your shit going on too. And so you can be there going like, fucking, fuck. And then it's like you look around and everyone's kind of going, And so you kind of got to go, oh, okay, I've got to take care of the people. It's the whole production. I've got to be aware of this whole production. And so I have to keep people in the boat. I have to keep this whole production going forward. Likewise, when you're shoji, you can be like, I'm kind of feeling overwhelmed by what's going on. I have so much shit to do all the time. I want to make sure that I'm sitting because I've got to go do interview, and I want to, be engaged and all that kind of stuff. But everybody wants me to make the tea, and I have to make sure that this is ready, and I have to make sure that that's ready for later, and I have to make sure that there's candles on, and it's one thing after the other. But you always have to be aware of what you're playing, the role that you're playing. And with people like the shoji or the tenzo, the reality is your primary role is one of service. And the same with the jikajitsu, although the way that the jikajitsu serves is by being an example of zendo practice. So you kind of have to sit. And if anything, you kind of have to be ruthless in your sitting. And the shoji, though, it's like if you're taking care of the tea and making sure windows are open and making sure that everybody's feeling well, and without sort of like being a helicopter shoji, taking care of people, and maybe you're not in the zendo hardly at all. That's the shoji role. Same with the tenzo. If you've got, if we suddenly unexpectedly have 25 people and we were expecting 12, and the tenzo's like, shit, I've got to be like, from the moment we have opening tea, I got to bow out and go start working in the kitchen. That's the tenzo's role. And the idea is that practicing the role, if you can really dissolve yourself into that role, that's Zen practice. So the reason that these roles are given to people that have been practicing for a little while is that the hope is that the idea that sitting isn't the total content of Zen practice has started to arise. A member of the Zen Center went to Nikki a few weeks ago and said, she said, do you practice Zen? And Nikki said, do you practice Zen? And the person said, well, I just finished sitting in the Zendo. And Nikki said, well, Zen isn't all about sitting, and kind of left it at that. And when I heard about this, I thought, that's pretty good. And it's true. Sitting is important, of course. We all know that. But as I say over and over again, that ability to completely immerse yourself in the activity that you're engaged in, to take on the role that you're playing in that particular moment, and then to be able to transform over and over again throughout the day. It starts with just this activity in the Zendo where we're sitting, and then the bell rings and the clapper sound, and we have to stand up and walk. And it's always very interesting to watch the residue, the resistance, the clinging that takes place just in that simple transition. Because we can be sitting there going, ring the bell, ring the bell, ring the bell, ring the bell. The bell rings and the clapper sounds, we say, oh, my leg's a little bit asleep. I don't want to stand up just yet. But I've got to. Everyone's standing up. So there's all this resistance and baggage and attachment to just the act of standing up. Okay, now we're standing. We get our belts all on and the walking starts. And we walk out and we're still like, oh gosh, okay, awkward with our walking. We're not totally engaged with it. We get out, the crunching gravel and the fresh air, and we start getting really into this. The second time we're heading up the big hill, we're like, Jesus, can I just sit down now? I mean, when are we going to go in and sit down? The Jikijitsu takes an extra turn up at the top, and we're like, oh God, what are we waiting for? The bell rings, we're like, oh, finally. We come back, and as soon as we get to the Zen, I was like, oh shit, we got to sit again. So, and this plays over and over again. And so the reason that we do this, and the reason in our tradition we don't have these big, long, we don't just come and sit for 3 hours straight, is because that capacity to rapidly transform and completely embrace the next thing is of crucial importance in practice and in life. Life changes all the time. And if we watch what's going on, we spend this is, I say in talks, we spend all of our time reminiscing about the past or visualizing about the future. And I think that when I say that, we have a very long window. It's like I'm reminiscing about the time when I was a child or 2 years ago, or I'm fantasizing about, what's happening in 5 years or 2 years. But the reality is, it's also reminiscing about a minute ago and fantasizing about 20 minutes ahead or 10 seconds ahead or what's going to happen when that final bell rings. And even that, we're not here. We're not engaged with what we're doing. And so those activities, those transitions that we have in Zen, it's always about kind of dying and being born simultaneously, without regret, without clinging, without resistance, without attachment, cleanly being born into the next thing. Time to stand, bow and stand, time to walk, bow and walk, time to sit, bow and sit, time to chant, 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 next chant. No gap. And that's it. We're always looking for that sort of sentimental moment to go, But already in Zen, Rinzai Zen practice, the practice has moved on without us. Our life has moved on without us because we're trying to hang on to something which is fundamentally not graspable. And this is something that we don't really learn intellectually. It's something that we learn experientially over and over again. And this is why we rotate positions, and that's why we change the form occasionally. I mean, it's not why we change the form. It's one of the values of changing form occasionally, is that it, no matter how many different ways we seem to learn this lesson, that tendency to kind of want to calcify something and say, this is how it's always going to be, is just so innate in us. One of the things that I've really appreciated about this particular play that I've been involved in, it's a musical, but it's actually an operetta. Musical is usually like, everyone loves a musical. There's like a dramatic scene, and then for no apparent reason, a song starts, and you start singing, la 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 la. And an operetta, like this Christmas Carol is like, even the few lines that are spoken, there's like music underneath it, and with that, there's meter behind it. And so in a dramatic production, if you screw something up, you can actually improvise your way to actually get the material that needs to be said so that everyone else can continue with their stuff. In this kind of operetta, that isn't possible because you have 8 beats to deliver the message. And if you screw it up, it's gone. And the next person delivers a line that's kind of hanging in space and doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense unless the audience can kind of put it together. So it's actually very difficult, and I find it very kind of Zen in a lot of ways, because you really have to be there for the other people. And you have to and then it's like you don't have time to bemoan you're missing the line, which is what we all want to do. We all want to say, oh shit, or oh, I screwed that up, or we want to criticize ourselves. And if you do that, A, you've got a microphone on so it comes out. And B, it's like the person's delivering the next line which you need to respond to. And just like in chanting, I find if I'm criticizing myself for having missed this one section of difficult Japanese dharani, I'm actually way off for the next part. There's no time for that. You just got to drop it and move on. So this is leading me to the next thing, which is like I have so many ideas for poor Unzan has been listening to my madness basically for the past week, where I'm like, maybe a Zen theater company, or I think the Zen choir idea has to totally happen, and really just the one thing that's really struck me about the sort of theater experience is that all these people are volunteers, right? All these people are engaged with the theater experience for fun and because they want to. And the demands that are put on these people are really significant. And so I often think, always feel bad for asking a lot of people in the Zen Center. But then I look at what's being asked of these theater people, and I'm like, holy shit, these people are going home and rehearsing with recordings and getting together in small groups and running lines and showing up for these late night rehearsals and all this kind of stuff. And so maybe I don't feel so bad for asking more of people, because I'm producing recordings and I'm producing all this material to try to support things. And I'm going to start saying, have you done it? Have you done it? Let's do more. Turn up. And I think that the other side of it, part of the reason is that the value of it. One of the core values in Zen West that I've always really struggled with, and I'm actually I just am starting to catch the corner of, is joy. It's one of our core values. And it's always one that I think it's been really hard to have people understand in the context of Zen practice, because when we come, it's always so friggin' early in the morning, and the food is always so simple, and the sitting is physically demanding, and once you get over the physically demanding, emotional shit starts coming up, and it's like there's work in the rain, and difficult. It's all this sort of difficulty, and so and it's like the joy concept. Everyone kind of gets it, and they're like, yeah, there are some aspects of my life that I'm finding but it's like so far removed from the experience of practice, it's hard to connect it. And so one of the things that's been really coming up, and I'm really wanting to just burn the rest of the dross off and come back. One of the things that really struck me when I started doing sesshin again with Genjo Osho after the hiatus, after the whole Rinzai-ji debacle, was that koan work is fun. Going in and becoming a flower, going in and becoming a tree, and going in and realizing emptiness. It's profound, yes. It's difficult to shed our inhibitions and our personal difficult histories and all that kind of stuff, yes. But the fundamental experience of doing that is really fun. And it's really joyous when it comes together. And I think I want everyone to really experience that, and I want everyone to feel that. Chanting, that creating something together as a group in which we each drop a little bit of ourselves and come together and create this harmonious thing is fun. It's joyous. And yes, sometimes it's difficult, and our tongues get tied around the Japanese, and the content is profound. All of that's totally true. But there's a reason that in every spiritual tradition there are vocal group practices. There's a reason. And we shouldn't approach it, as sometimes I think we all do, with this sort of dread or like it's what we need to get through in order to get to the good stuff that's real Zen or real sitting and all that kind of stuff. And God, why does Eshu always seem to be increasing the amount of chanting? Well, what I'm also realizing is that we develop a bunch of other things around sitting, but we don't spend any time developing the tools that we use for some of these other things. Your voice and your body are both things that we use in Zen practice. Chanting, and certainly in koan practice, if you're the more physically limited you are, the less able you are to engage and respond dynamically. And that's in koan practice, but even more as we go forward in our lives. I mean, we all have limitations. We all have age, and we all have ailments, and we all have genetic predispositions and all of that kind of stuff. But there's a whole bunch of shit that we have a lot of control over, and that we can always be working on developing, because essentially the way that we interact, the way that we manifest, the way that we walk through the world is necessarily limited by the capacity of our physical being and our vocal being. So the skills that we have in relationship, the skills that we have in using our voice, the skills that we have in thinking, the physical attributes that we have in our body, these are not things that we should fixate and say, well, that's just who I am. Certainly, we do have limitations. If you have arthritis, I don't expect you to start running marathons, right? If you are, I don't know, 70 years old and you've had a bunch of heart attacks, I don't expect you to start, driving yourself to the point where you're going to die. But what is it that we can develop? What is it that we can open up? What is it that we can transform? Letting go of the fixations that we have about who it is that we think we are is a part of this practice. And part of my job is to always be pushing that. We all need rest, absolutely. We all need a chance after a period of expansion and stretching in and challenging ourselves. We need a chance to sort of like reacclimatize to the new me and all that kind of stuff. But never sort of like setting up a camp where, okay, that's good. And I hope that I don't do this either. My hope is always to set an example of always sort of pressing in. There's always more to go. So I guess, I say, oh boy, you guys are in trouble. But really what I'm trying to say is my hope is for the next several years of Zen practice that we're all going to have a lot of fun. And in that fun, it's going to be ugly. There's going to be personal issues and physical ailments. There's going to be births and there's going to be deaths, both internally and externally, macroscopic and microscopic births and deaths over and over again. But this shouldn't be just a nihilistic kind of like dismal like grind where we're here to die the great death and manifest no self and all that kind of stuff. The reason is being born is also fun. Manifesting in a more harmonious and creative way is fun. There's a joy in it. When we come together, I used to hate stuff like the fall harvest potluck, or social events, or art groups in the Zen Center and all that kind of stuff. And more I'm like, this is fantastic. It has to get beyond where we're putting our egos out there for each other to judge and criticize. It has to get beyond where we're trying to make ourselves look good. It has to come to the place where we're willing to step out and just go, because we're in an environment where that's what people do. We just step out on the skinny branches and, warts and all, and we share that with everyone in our community, because that is the basis of what our community is. And in that, there's a tremendous amount of joy, and there's a tremendous amount of love, and there's a tremendous amount of creativity and fun that comes from it all. And people will look at us all and they'll say, those people are really serious, those Zen people. Because when we sit, we're all really serious. But the thing is, we can look at that really serious, disciplined form of Zen as a game. When I was a kid or in theater classes, we'd play this game where the object was an individual would sit on a chair in the middle of the stage, and they would have a serious face on. And everybody else in the class's job was to break their focus, was to make them laugh. And so you could basically do everything you wanted to except for touch the person who is in the chair. And they would just have to maintain their focus and their attention. And it's a delightful game. It's a great time, especially if you're the person in the chair, like people are doing crazy stuff all around you, and you just got to maintain your focus. And that it's fun doesn't diminish the fact that it is a fantastic tool to develop focus. And that's, I think, what we have to remember. When we're sitting in the Zendo, and crazy stuff happens in the Zendo, or sometimes nothing happens in the Zendo and someone just starts giggling. And that's enough. Everyone's like, just remember, the game we're playing is focus. Just stay focused on your practice. Don't give in to the sort of circular thinking of giddiness. When we're doing the Kinhin, this is a game of keeping in step. And that game requires you to be focused, and it requires you to be engaged. When we're engaged in koan practice, it's a game of, can I drop myself completely and immerse myself in this interaction that's being done as koan practice. And to the degree that we can play that game is the degree that we can actually engage with Zen practice. But just like games, sometimes when we're at a dance, or if we're playing a game with a group of strangers, if we're feeling insecure or we're feeling unsafe or vulnerable, our egos put up defenses and distance ourselves from what's going on, and we're less able to do it. We play it half-heartedly is the phrase that we have. And so what we're trying to do in Zen practice is engage wholeheartedly. And so I'm going to start over the next, starting now. That's really, it's kind of always what I do, but more and more, I think my attitude is shifted to like, I really want to encourage you and challenge you to do the things, everything that we're doing in Zen practice, and really everything that we're doing in life wholeheartedly. Maybe the way that I'm going to start encouraging you to do that is going to be different. Maybe scaring you into doing it isn't always the best way of doing it, but it's not going to leave my toolbox. But more and more, I want us to, and it's like, whenever I talk about theater or acting, whenever I use this metaphor of a game, I think it's really easy for us to belittle that, to say, if I'm just acting, or if I'm just playing a game, it's not real, it's not serious, it's not genuine. And that's the perspective of a non-athlete, and that is the perspective of a non-actor, because we look at this thing and think of it as separate, and it's not there. And certainly there are bad actors, and there are bad players, or I shouldn't say bad, they're just half-hearted actors and half-hearted players. So when you see a half-hearted actor, and you're watching a dramatic performance, you see the character that's being played, but also simultaneously you see the actor. They're like a Two-Face, like this the villain Two-Face. It's like part of the qualities of that person are the character in the piece, and part of the qualities of that are the actor who walks around in Hollywood or whatever. Likewise, an athlete, they're always an incomplete, half-hearted athlete is someone who's always holding a part of themselves back, conserving something I don't want to pull this, or I don't want to do that. And you don't really see these in professional sports because they suck. Acting, for some reason, they still get into big movies. But anyways, so but the other side is when you see an athletic prodigy, or when you see a master performer, there is no gap. There's no residue of who they are. Whenever I think of an actor that I sort of point to for this, I always think of Sir Ben Kingsley. Do you ever know who that is? So it's like, you can play Gandhi, and you can play an Iranian general, and you can play a Cockney psychopath, and it's not until an hour into the movie where you go, oh, this is the guy that played Gandhi. What? There's no residue. And then you see an interview with him and he's a totally different person. And this is what we're looking for in practice. Likewise in athletics, or even, in arts or in music. When you're conscious of the musician and the music, the musician as an individual person, they're not quite there. And when they disappear, and it's almost like they become a conduit for something greater, the voice of the cosmos through music, where you say, oh, okay, that person's transmitting the light. Or the actor who disappears completely into the character, you can't not watch that. The athlete that is transmitting in this way, or just gets themselves out of the way, they're like superheroes. Like I always think I feel like I was privileged in my life to see Wayne Gretzky play hockey and to see Michael Jordan play basketball. These people did things that like defied the laws of reality almost. And then afterwards they would show up, and you could see this transition, right? In hockey and in basketball, when the action is happening, they're not really there. When the really big plays are being done, they're completely immersed in what's going on. And then the goal is scored, or the basket is dunked, or whatever, and then they do their little dance or whatever. And that's the person. Hey, I'm back! Woo! That was awesome! Now, back to the game, and off they go. And so this is, what I really like about Zen practice, and what I see developing in our community that I want to press more, is that when we come together to do Zen practice, it's just like a dramatic production. There's a 5 o'clock call for a 7 o'clock show, and everyone comes in and they're chatting and they're putting on makeup and they're dressing in their costumes just like we do. And then as we get closer to the time that we're beginning, showtime, the conversation drops off, people get into role, and then the production starts and everyone is on. If you talk to me backstage and I'm not on stage, I'll answer you in an English accent because I'm an English person right now. It was helpful because there's a whole bunch of fog, and anyways. And so it's the same thing here, that when we come, Zen practice, formal Zen practice, drop into it. Allow yourself to be carried by it. Allow yourself to use the form to let go and experience that transformation, that letting go of your fixated self for that period of time. When it ends, what I've seen in a lot of Zen centers is when people show up, they feel like they need to, it's like they make another transition where they have to become their Zen person self. And then they make a transition into practice. And then after practice, they have to be this sort of really Zen person self. And then maybe on the way home, they go and have a beer because, man, that was stressful to not actually be myself. And so what I want for people is to really experience that whole transition. And when we come out of it, being respectful of the space, being respectful of the practice that we've just done of clarifying the mind, but to come out of it in a very natural way where we can be honest, where we can say, oh, I screwed that up, and that's okay. And I can see all the mistakes that I made. I'm not a bad person because of them. I haven't befouled Buddhism for all time because of my ineptitude. It's just like this wonderful opportunity for us to apply ourselves wholeheartedly has been put before us. How did we do? How would we like to transfer? What can I do between now and the next time I play this game to actually try to round myself out or develop that skill set or develop that set of tools so that I can play this game a little bit more effectively and harmoniously and uplift everybody else as well. The reason being that this game that we play, the skills that we play in this game are transferable. I think about this when I play Dungeons and Dragons with the kids. All of the skills that we use in Dungeons and Dragons, plan making, teamwork, figuring out who does what well and getting them to do that, it's all transferable. I think that people who play Dungeons and Dragons probably make better managers than everybody else. So, anyways. Maybe the theme for 2016 should be fun. Such fun. It'll be so much fun. That's it. I guess to round this out, I just want to say to Unzan, who's been here for a month now, it's been a lot of fun having you here. I'm twisted a little bit, and so fun for me is like constantly being on the border of exhaustion, constantly dealing with people where they're raw and vulnerable, and being in a raw and vulnerable spot myself, dealing with, a dog that wants to be walked and a wife that wants to be hugged and a kid who wants to be driven somewhere, and all of that all at once just makes me rich. And so it's been a lot of fun, Unzan, and my life is a lot of fun because of all of your support. So thank you all, and I hope we can all have fun for a long time.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.